So we have and haven't talked about Javier Milei on this channel before. We've obviously talked about him in sort of the context on Geoscope of some of the stuff as well. But honestly, like just as you've seen in the past couple of days, there is like so much stuff going on with Trump. That exact same thing is going on in Argentina. Like Javier Milei is like Trump, but 10 times worse because he has done so much damage to Argentina. Inflation over there is out of control. He has deregulated everything, which, oh, if you haven't seen very recently, has caused this big canal that goes through one of their biggest cities, which is also a water source as well, has turned bright red, and no one knows why. Like, no one knows why. Because guess what? The agency that was responsible for looking after waterways and investigating things like that, and finding out if, well, that water is safe to drink or not, guess what? He got rid of them. Just so this is again, remember, the guy who conservatives constantly praise as being this absolutely amazing guy, but no one ever brings up the stuff like he does with this in case of the river, and there's no one to inspect the river, there's no one to find out what exactly went on here, and of course communicating with his ghost dog to get economic ideas. No one ever brings up that part of Javier Milei when they're talking about, quote, how great he is. Well, guess what? He's about to do something so potentially monumentally dumb, it could be about to literally explode Argentina's entire economy. Like, their economy could just go like that. Like, that is how dangerous the gamble he is now about to potentially undo. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do click on the likes on the like and share button down below, and of course there's links to the Patreon page, there's the buy me coffee link where you can buy me coffee, there's the YouTube thank you button, there's the Pony Club down below as well, and of course there's the YouTube thank you button too. So let's find out more about this, because this is so monumentally dumb. I do not know how he's going to quite frankly last. I'm surprised he's lasted as long as he did, but apparently conservatives have come in and, quote, slowed him down a bit. However, he insists on doing a lot of this crazy libertarian stuff, and unfortunately it keeps on getting worse, and it keeps on getting worse and worse and worse, and unfortunately not a lot of people report on it in the West of what's going on, unless it's like, a conservative praising Javier Milei for, quote, being really good, and then you look at like some of the stuff he does, you're like, he's not really he's not really. Oh, anyway, so let's crack on then into this. So Javier Milei's quest now to defuse Argentina's currency control bomb. So let's find out what's going on here. So Argentina's libertarian president, Javier Milei, is now promising to lift the country's strict capital and currency controls this year, starting the clock on a very high-risk mission that is now essential to revival of his troubled economy. The controls, which limit an individual's and companies' access to dollars and to set an official exchange rate, have been in place for 9 of the past 13 years. Foreign businesses say they are a huge hurdle to investment in Argentina, even as Milei's free market reform drive now piques their interest. Bear in mind what we've said before about Javier Milei. Javier Milei, for those of you who don't know, is trying to dollarize the Argentinian economy. As we've said before, why is the US bank or even Donald Trump going to bail out Javier Milei and print more dollars? They cannot print more dollars. It is not their currency. It is there is the peso, and as a result, prices like the exchange rate is just absolutely gone crazy. This is only going to make it even worse. And yet, this is what he is now trying to do. And a lot of businesses, you see, oh, we're interested now. Why? Because there's no, they pay no tax practically. There's no corporation tax. There's no worker controls or protections or anything like that. They can pollute. They can do all kinds of stuff. Like we just said, why is that, canal suddenly, turned red? I think that's a bit worrying. But of course, as remember, Milei got rid of the department that would go and look into that and, find the people responsible. So, just a bit of a problem when it comes to some of that stuff. So Milei is currently trying to seek an IMF loan to try and help him lift these controls. But he says that he will do this so by the end of the year regardless. Even without the IMF helps, these controls will no longer exist on the 1st of January 2026. He told a television station on Monday. Now, if there is a disbursement, we can do it faster. We have to see how the program is structured. Milei has a very good reason to be very hesitant on this, says economists known collectively as the El Cipo, the trap. The controls are made up of now half a dozen critical regulations and many smaller rules, which help stabilize the peso and prevent capital flight from Argentina. So bear in mind, the peso is already in a lot of trouble. A lot of trouble. Milei is going to remove these. So if you are removing rules and regulations that help keep the peso stabilized, what do you think is going to happen? Like, what do you think is going to happen? I've said this before to the Argentinians. I am sorry, but the only upside, this again, the only silver lining is that Milei is going to prove why you do not put someone who is a full-blown libertarian in charge of an economy or in power, because he is destroying Argentina left, right, and center. Unfortunately, doesn't get talked about enough. So removing the wrong rule at the wrong time, and this is where you'll see where it starts to get bad. So removing the wrong rule at the wrong time could unleash too much pent-up dollar demand, now leaving Argentina's cash-strapped central bank unable to respond and force the government to devalue the peso's official exchange rate, or now could even provoke volatility on the back of legal finance markets where Argentina buys dollars because of access to the official market is restricted. So just bear that in mind. The undoing these rules would drive up demand for the dollar. Remember, Argentina's currency is not the dollar, meaning America is not going to give them those dollars. They're not going to suddenly start printing more dollars for Argentina. There's only, so much that they can get a hold of at one time. That is going to cause huge financial problems. It is only going to get worse if he goes ahead with this. So either of these scenarios could reignite an inflation crisis that Milei has so far managed to tame with very severe austerity packages. The monthly inflation rate has now fallen from its peak of 26% in December of 2023 to below 3%. This is now the main factor sustaining Milei's constant 50% approval rating, pollsters say. So because he went into extreme austerity measures, I mean extreme austerity measures. Like if you think austerity was bad in the UK, Argentina is 10 times worse, because Milei got rid of entire government departments, as we said earlier. That canal, there's no department to check that anymore. And that's why he managed to sort of get it under control. The fact that the inflation is so low is the only reason he is popular. And that sort of shocks me, considering how much poverty in Argentina has skyrocketed because of this. But there you go. Anyway, Milei, of course, doesn't want to risk cutting the wrong wire in this bomb that he's now trying to disarm and blowing up his whole success story, said Fabio Rodriguez, the director of M&R Associates, a financial consultant in Buenos Aires. The problem is that we've had these controls for so long that if we don't know how many people will actually sell pesos when they are lifted or where the exchange rate should be, just, oh my word. Like, that's terrifying. Just remember, you are restricted from selling pesos to buy dollars. Milei is trying to dollarize his economy. If you suddenly say restrictions gone, everyone starts selling pesos to buy the dollar, the price of the peso versus the dollar is just going to go through the floor. It is just going to go completely through the floor. And also, even more worrying, because while that is going on, what is the exchange rate? Just hey, Americans, it could be worse. It could be so much worse. All I've got to say on that, really. Argentina is, of course, due to hold midterm elections in October, where Milei's La Libertaria Alvinus does hope to now grow its very tiny congressional majority. Analysts do say that Milei is unlikely now to risk changes to the controls in the run-up to the polls, but authorities say that they do aim to try and reach an agreement with the IMF by April. Milei has said that he needs $11 billion to replenish the central bank's negotiable hard currency reserves and bolster its firepower to prevent a potential run on the peso as controls ease. So even Milei knows doing this is insane because they have dollarized their economy. They have already run out pretty much of dollars. Like, that's how much their central bank is out of dollars. He needs now 11 billion to replenish his dollar amount. I cannot see the IMF going ahead with that. Like, I genuinely cannot see the IMF going ahead with that. If they do, it would be insane for them to do so. So Argentina is already the fund's now largest debtor, still owing more than $40 billion for its most recent program, which concluded back in December. An IMF delegation did leave Argentina last week after negotiations, which the main sticking point was Milei's very unorthodox exchange rate policy. So the peso was allowed to weaken just 2% a month back in 2024, with a pace of reduction to around 1% just this month. The inflation, of course, running well above that. The currency appreciated more than, of course, 40% in real terms just last year. And Argentina has had a constant run-up account deficit since June. And the central bank has, of course, struggled to actually now build up its reserves. But IMF officials, including the managing director, Cristina Georgia, have at least praised the rest of Milei's policies, in which 2024 delivered Argentina's first budget surplus in 14 years. That has at least fueled now growing expectations of a deal, particularly as, of course, the fund was willing to lend Milei's left-leaning predecessor, who printed billions of dollars worth of pesos to spend funding and failed to relax currency controls. Analysts now do predict that people familiar with these talks said that the deal could now hinge on the phasing out and the listing with controls carefully designed to manage new dollar demand. Someone said, I would be very surprised if they actually decided to lend without commitment now on lifting the controls, but they shouldn't empty the whole spaghetti in one go, says Hector Torres, an Argentinian former IMF director. So, as I said, okay, he's going to do this, but you've got no idea. If you lift these controls and all of a sudden your peso, which is worthless, by the way, thank you to Milei, because now, you need to be paid in dollars because that's the only currency that's actually worth something in Argentina. How many people are going to get rid of their pesos once those control goes? Like, I understand the description that has been given. Like, this is just a bomb waiting to go off. And if it doesn't go off straight away, it's all it's been done is lighting a taper to the match to find out what could go on there. So Milei's team has at least had a very lengthy menu options to choose from. The government now has already started to remove barriers for imports to send money overseas. Experts do say that some financial regulations, such as holding the peso government bonds for a maximum of 24 hours, may be removed without limited fallout. Other regulations are, of course, very hard to cut. The restriction that prevents multinational corporations from transferring profits overseas, for example, is keeping some 10 billion worth of pesos in Argentina that would potentially be now converted to dollars if that rule was scrapped, according to the Foundation Capital. And again, what does that mean? If $10 billion is suddenly translated into dollars, Milei wants 11. That leaves only like $1 billion left if you do the maths. That still isn't good because, of course, all of these companies are going to translate into dollars instantly as soon as it happens. You're going to get a lot of people scrambling that day. That there will be runs on the banks. Like I can see there being runs on the banks and demands for dollars when this happens. This is asking for a disaster. Like, this is just asking for a disaster to happen. The central bank president, Santiago Mazzulli, said back in November that such stockpiles were now the main impediment lifting the controls, and that the government was now trying to prioritize restrictions on future flows of money. One key regulation in the IMF's crosshairs is the government's regime for Argentina's critical agricultural exporters, who must convert 80% of their dollar earnings with the central bank, but they cannot divert the remainder into a parallel market for a better exchange rate. The cost now to the central bank is up to $12 billion in potential reserves of inflows last year. When, however, the IMF support funds will arrive is, of course, unclear. While the fund does watchers say that the deal looks increasingly close and that Milei's 11 billion figure is feasible, it is unclear how much would be transferred, of course, up front. Andrew Warner, the former Western Hemisphere director of the IMF, wrote a blog last week about dispersing large amounts upfront would allow Argentina to spend IMF resources on keeping the peso strong, but depleting now its current amount deficit. This would leave the country in a far weaker financial position than once the exchange rate correction happens, he added. So again, we don't know what the exchange rate is going to be. That could be just as bad. The most likely outcome, he argued, was for the fund now to only offer the financing to allow Argentina to make $2.5 billion in payments as it is now due to the fund itself back in 2025, revealing the stress on now its scarce cash resources, but to wait until 2026 to provide now greater financial backing to now lift the controls. In this scenario, the government would only lift minor parts of the controls until the elections, which would focus on its economic policy on securing enough dollars to sustain the exchange rate and control market jitters. You can see the problem. We have talked about this since day one. You are having to rely on another economy, on another currency, which you have no control over, which you are constantly having to buy. You could not print that money. It's terrible. Remember, what happens if something, let's say, Donald Trump crashes the economy? What happens then to the dollar? So too goes Argentina. Like, and if anything, it will hit Argentina like 10 times worse. Like 10 times worse if a crash happens in America. So let's finish this off. They will do whatever it takes to try and now maintain stability until the elections. This now will open up their options. Says Amaldi Contes, an economist in Argentina consulting the Profit Consultors. Until then, they are now putting the economy in cruise control. I cannot see this ending well. I can just not see this ending well. There will be a run on the banks to get dollars. Word will be going out instantly. Sell your get your pesos out now, and then that makes the peso worthless. What do you do in an economy where your currency is worthless, so you have to buy another currency? I mean, all I'm going to say is, silver lining, as we've said before, this will just show you how bad, libertarian economic policies really are. So, in that way, that's the only silver lining that will happen. And I'm sorry, Argentina, that you have to be the lab experiment to show that. And then, of course, the second one being like he is hoping that there isn't going to be a run on the peso. But as we've said before, why? Why wouldn't there be? You're saying your own country's currency is worthless, so we're going to buy dollars instead. But America ain't going to come to Milei's assistance. That's for sure. Ooh. So, um, as always, on that, that just looks like a disaster waiting to happen. So, as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.